This week's parsha we have the mitzvah of Eved Ivri, of a Jewish person who is sold into slavery. We'll explain in a minute how that happens, but he's sold into slavery. And the Torah says that after 7 years he has the right to go free. That's the end of his of the deal between him and his owner. So the Torah tells us, though, if after 7 years he decides, Ahavti Sadaini, Vesishti Vesbanai, I like my master, I like the lifestyle, I'm comfortable. So the Torah says, fine. But what we do is as follows: we take him to the Bezdin, to the court, and we put his ear by the door, and we take a peg and we put a hole in his ear. And by doing so, that allows him to then continue the lifestyle of being a slave. So Rashi already comments, what's the inning of his ear? So Rashi says that this is a form of punishment. Oizen zu sheshama, that ear that heard by Har Sinai, that we're Hashem's servants, and we should not be servants of other servants. Yet he goes, and that ear that heard such a thing, that heard how great a Jew should be, and allows himself to be sold and to remain as a slave by another Jew, such an ear has to be bore. That's what the pasuk says. Now let's give a little bit of context of what type of person this is. Why was he originally sold as a slave? So according to Chazal, the reason why a Jew would be sold as a slave is because he stole, he's a ganef, and he was caught, and he was unable to pay for his theft, and so to pay for the theft, we sell him into slavery to earn money to pay back the person he stole from. So once we recognize the context of who this person is, now we have an interesting question. We don't punish him with piercing his ear when he originally is caught as a thief. You could do the same thing. That ear that heard by Har Sinai, don't steal, that person went and stole, his ear should be pierced. We don't do that. That we just sell him into slavery in order that he should pay back his debt. Only when he decides after 7 years that I'm comfortable as a slave and I want to remain, only then do we pierce his ear. Which is interesting, because there's no prohibition technically of selling oneself as a slave. It's unnecessary, it's clearly not recommended, but it's not a prohibition. Stealing seems to be much more severe, and yet it doesn't carry that punishment of piercing the ear. Why is that? The answer is as follows. The Torah recognizes that people make mistakes. That's understood. Even a serious offense like stealing, it's something that a person might do. And that's one thing. And when a person commits such a crime, we understand we don't necessarily pierce his ear. We try to deal with the repercussions. We sell him into slavery that he should be able to pay his debts. But there's one thing a person making a mistake, and there's something altogether different for the person to settle into that lifestyle of the mistake and to accept it and to say, that's who I am. That's a much bigger problem. When that slave is first sold into slavery, okay, it was a mistake that he did and he has to deal with the repercussions of that mistake of stealing. But after 7 years where he's given the opportunity to leave, and he says, Ahavti Sadaini, I like it here, I'm comfortable. That means that the person not only made the mistake, but is identifying himself with the mistake. He now looks at himself in the mirror and he sees a slave. He sees someone who's low, someone who's undeserving of being free. That's a tragedy. It's one thing to make a mistake, but it's another thing altogether to identify oneself with as a person who makes mistakes. The Gemara says, for example, that the Jewish people are compared to a pomegranate. And what exactly is our quality that makes us like a pomegranate? So the Chazal say the reason why we're compared to that beautiful fruit of a pomegranate is because we're full of regret, like a pomegranate is full of seeds. That's a funny thing. It's not so positive, you know. Why don't we say that we're full of mitzvahs and Torah and mitzvahs? Like, that's a much beautiful thing. Why do Chazal say that we're full of regret? The answer is because there's something very beautiful about being regretful about one's mistakes. It means that you've not identified yourself as that person. You're still holding on to who you are in a perfected state. And because of that, because you identify yourself as someone uplifted and holy and special and divine, therefore because of that, you feel bad about the mistakes that you've made. That's fine. And that's a good sign. That's a sign of a healthy connection to a holy place. The problem begins when a person descends into mistakes to the point of where it becomes second nature and it becomes their identity. That's the tragedy. So Hashem should help that with the strength of this week's parsha, we should become people that, although we make mistakes all the time, and that's true, but to never allow ourselves to become comfortable with that. Always to be full of charata, like a rimon is full of seeds. So Hashem Shalom, we should come to Shabbos with Menuchas HaNefesh and Menuchas HaGuf, and both individually and collectively see the redemption of our people. B'yas Kol Tzedek, Meher V'meinu Amen.
Thank you, Hashem. Thank